Ladies and gents, welcome to another episode of Richard Grannon and Friends. I'm joined here today by Professor Edward Dutton, and we're going to have a little bit of a chat about what Ed has been up to and what he's into. Edward.
Hello again.
Hello.
We keep running into each other. We ran into each other in Liverpool,
Yes.
which was good fun.
Yes.
Your home turf.
Yes.
Your what else? That's the Wirral bit, wasn't it? But there's the posh bit.
It's close enough.
But the less posh bit.
Yeah.
And now we're in. I'm not actually sure where we are, but somewhere in southern Spain anyway.
Somewhere in
I
southern
was sort
Spain.
of abducted and brought here.
This is the nicest location I've ever done.
It's pretty impressive, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know. I assume one of the cameras is pointing over there, but it's a pretty impressive view.
This is the most impressive view I've ever done for an interview.
This is certainly more impressive than the cellar where I normally do stuff.
Yes.
Like that's just a wall, a black screen. This is like, you know, this is real life. This is beauty. So yeah, it's
bit of sun as well. Where are you from originally, Ed?
originally from Wimbledon, so sort of the area around there, yeah, and yeah, so this is sort of no man's land really. Mm-hmm. It's a sort of Surrey-London border. Yes. Where if you say you're from London, then people that are from, I don't know, in London, so it's not really London, is it? Yeah. And then if you say, well, you're from Surrey, then people that are from, I don't know, Guildford or something, so it's not really Surrey, is it? And so you're kind of in this no man's land between the two. Yeah. So that's where I'm. The borderlands.
Do you usually say Surrey or London?
I would say I used to say London. When I started at university, I think I just said London. Yeah. And then they of course say where. Yeah. And then it's an area Wimbledon no one's heard of. So I just say eventually I just started saying Wimbledon, and then that was. People have heard of that. Almost everyone's internationally heard of Wimbledon.
Yes. So to an ignorant northerner, Wimbledon is absolutely London, but you know I'm not going to get into a fight with any Cockneys.
Parts of it are, and then parts of it were only became London in like the early '60s. Right. So that's where I'm from. Right. So it's right on the border. Yeah.
So did you spend all of your childhood in Wimbledon?
Yep. Yep.
From till what age were you?
Well, I was born in Tooting. Mm-hmm. I lived until the age of 2 in Wandsworth, opposite Wandsworth Common in Flat. Mm-hmm. And then I think that's my first memory actually. Is moving to the house. Yeah. My mum said I was just 2. Just 2, and of course they were all excited, and they said we're moving to a house. Yeah. And I remember that night that we moved into the house. That may well be my first certain memory. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And then you were there up until
university.
Until university.
Well, obviously I was there in the non-term time as well. Yeah. But yeah. So then at 18, I went to up north.
Up north.
So you're up your way. Well, no, the other side of the yeah.
Which university did you go
Durham.
to? Durham.
So yeah, north. When we first got there, it's a funny thing with the north. So first time I went to the north, I was 11. Because I was very into history when I was a kid, mm-hmm. and I would have a period of history that I was into at any given time. Mm-hmm. And when I was 11, that was Anglo-Saxon / Viking times. Mm-hmm. And in that half term when I was 11, my parents took me to York, Jorvik Centre. Yes. Yeah, and then up further to Lindisfarne. Nice. And when we couldn't understand a word. Right, they were saying, and then you get used to it very quickly. And then in Durham as well, me and my father were walking in this car. Go, yeah, you cannot go up there because if you go up there, you're getting a problem with the other cars coming, don't they? And it's extraordinary how quickly you get used to it. Yeah, yeah. There's a friend of mine who lives up in Durham. I'm actually going to go and see him next weekend. When you were into history as a kid, did you follow history in a linear fashion, or did you bounce around? I bounced around. I bounced around. So I think when I was 9, I was Northern Conquest, great, and then when I was 10, I was into Tudor times, and it was very useful that the Hampton Court Palace was quite near where we lived. Yeah, and we could go there. We joined English Heritage, and we could go every so often. You go to castle or whatever. So I've been to loads of the castles and palaces and whatever in the UK around that age, early 90s, and then. And this is before they were full of tourists. Yeah. I mean, in those days, I'm talking 1991, summer, you could go to Windsor Castle, and if I remember correctly, A, you didn't queue to get in, and B, it was free. Right. And now, when I was last in Windsor, which was 2018, I was there researching for a book on Winston Churchill, headmaster, and there's a queue down the street and round the corner. Yes. Of Chinese people and Russians, inspired by the royal wedding and whatever else. And there was those horrible touristy shops that you used to only get in London that sell tack, and Edinburgh that sell tack, and have now migrated or have expanded to Windsor. So it was that, and then I bounced around different periods, but I was never into the 18th century for some reason. I only got into the 18th century when I was a teenager.
What was it about history that fascinated you when you were a kid?
It was fascinating. It was just a sort of psycho-history, the idea of being there at Hampton Court Palace and thinking that you're from some little terraced house in Wimbledon, and there you are standing where the kings and queens of the country have walked around, and there's the glow of history between these cobbles. There was just something almost, I wouldn't say spiritual, but there was just something quite numinous and fascinating about it. And so I was always, I'm into history. I've always enjoyed going to historical places for that reason, just that sense that you're almost part of something, that the shadows of something deeper are there. It's almost poetic. And so I was always into a different period of history. My Lego would reflect it. So if it was the way you could make Anglo-Saxon Lego, by the way, or Tudor Lego actually, was to mix. Because in those days there was the big three. There was space Lego, there was Danish normal town Lego, and there was medieval Lego, the big three. And then now there's all this Harry Potter Lego and God knows. They don't have to be creative anymore. And they brought in pirate Lego in about 1990.
Right.
And if you mix them together, you see, be creative, then you can make different periods like Anglo-Saxon Lego or Tudor Lego or whatever.
You can make it look the way it should look.
Yeah. But you've got to think, you've got to be creative. Whereas now they don't have to be creative. It's just okay, let's just play Harry Potter.
So you as a child, you were experiencing and enjoying history through subjectively putting yourself in that time and thinking, what would it be like, and imagining that you were living in that.
But obviously, it was a sort of sanitized version of it. You have no understanding of when you're 10 years old that the child mortality rate is 50%,
right?
Or they're dying very young of whatever, tuberculosis or something like that. Like that wasn't part of my games,
right?
We didn't know about that.
Yeah.
So it was a very like same with my grandfather. I assume you have a grandfather that fought in the war. So did I. Yep. And he would always tell me these war stories. I'd look forward when he came to tell me war stories. He always sanitized them.
Yes.
Well, except there was some. As I got older, he'd just talk about it and sanitize it less. Like I remember him saying that he in Greece and he arrived during the Civil War and there'd just been a massacre. And he said, and there were these people. There was these dead bodies all over the road. You know what they look like? They look, like hedgehogs when they're on the street. They've been run over. They look like that.
Wow.
And very matter of fact about it.
So how important is history to you today?
Well, I don't particularly like reading things like novels. I only like reading novels in so much as you can, if they're reasonably old, then you're seeing them as almost their historical sources. They're a window into how people thought at that time, or how people felt at that time, or how people spoke at that time, and so on. I wouldn't really read a contemporary novel. It doesn't interest me.
No.
I'd much rather I do all this reading on psychology and the stuff that relates to my research, and so I wanted to read something on the plane to kind of relax. Then I would probably read a book about some area of history that I don't know much about. Like, for example, I was reading about the Moorish history of Spain on the way here.
That's pretty
interesting.
Yeah. I didn't enjoy history growing up, and nobody taught me to take it as something that you could use your imagination to imagine being in that scenario. And there's a Bob Hoskins audiobook where he is talking as though he was a soldier at Agincourt. And describing the slaughter of the French knights at Agincourt. And I think I was 18 when I was already at the end of my school career, and I was like, oh, this is how you can experience history. And that was what started.
And then genealogy became interesting as well. So I had an ancestor, like a brother of an ancestor who fought at Agincourt.
Oh, did you?
Right. So then you've almost got like a personal connection to these kinds of people. So then genealogy can become quite interesting as well.
Yeah. What did you study at Durham?
Theology.
Theology?
I was doing my A-levels, and I did English, history, and Christian theology. And I always thought I'd do an English degree or a history degree. And then for some reason I found something so fascinating, I don't know why, but at 16, about the philosophy of religion, for example, and this kind of stuff, that I started thinking, oh, well, I'll do a theology degree. And then I found that it's much easier to get into a good university to read theology anyway than to read English or history. It's less competitive.
Yeah.
So then it became a theology degree. So that's why I did.
Did you enjoy the degree?
Well, I think I enjoyed bits of it. I think a lot of it depended on how good the lecturer was.
Sure.
So in the first year, I had a lecturer. Sorry if you're watching, but he was boring, and he's my Old Testament lecturer. So I didn't like Old Testament.
Yeah.
And then in my second year, I had lecturers in Old Testament that were so scintillatingly brilliant.
Yeah.
That they kind of charismatically made me interested in Old Testament.
Right.
And so in the third year, because we do theology, the compulsory modules are New Testament, Old Testament, systematic theology, and church history. And then you have two more that you can just select. And in the third year, you do your dissertation, 2 modules, and then you can just do whatever 4 modules you like. And I mainly did Old Testament because I was so fascinated. The big thing was the lecturer. Like in my first year, for example, I had a really good New Testament lecturer, so I was really into New Testament, hated Old Testament. And then in my second year, I'm sorry, but he was he was a lovely man,
but dull,
I'm afraid. And so I just turned off New Testament, and that's a big part of it. I think if you're charismatic and you're really into your subject and whatever, then you can kind of spread that like a contagion, but in a good way, to other people, and that's much more important than really any other factor. So I enjoyed elements of it if I had a charismatic lecturer who was absolutely fascinated by his subject.
Yeah. When you were 16 and you were looking at religious philosophy and theology, what was it that fascinated you about that?
Well, I guess at that age, when you're 16 and you're a bit of a twat, and so you're nihilistic, and it's these fundamental questions of does God exist or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, of course God doesn't exist. Obviously not. So why on earth do people believe in God? And then there were these arguments for the existence of God and arguments against it and all this, and I found this quite fascinating. You see, and so it was the fundamental questions of life. And at 16, you have this ridiculous nihilistic sort of worldview whereby other people have sunk down to the bottom of the lake of life, but they've got stuck on a sort of ridge here. But I'm going down to the real depths, the darkness, atheism and nihilism, which is probably how woke people feel now, to be honest. But I think basically these people are perpetual 16-year-olds. They've never quite got over being sick. They're just stuck. They're stuck psychologically being a petulant 16-year-old. It's just like everything's so fucking unfair. It's so unfair. I hate you. I hate you. So like Kevin from Harry Enfield and from Chums. Yeah. I hate you. So unfair. Why do you believe in God for, idiot? Right? And I think that's what you're like then.
Yeah.
And there's something quite attractive. And also I think as well, I was at a Roman Catholic school. So in those days, the best schools in the area are Catholic, religious schools anyway. Yeah. And my mum happened to be a teacher at this Catholic school, so it's I was able to get in. We're not Catholic, but I was able to get in on that basis.
Yeah.
And so you're surrounded by all this religiosity, and so you kind of rebel against it. Although I subsequently discovered when I went to university that there was a very different kind of religiosity. There was this fundamentalist Protestantism, you see, and that's what I got fascinated by. I mean, this Catholicism, all it was that in the morning there'd be a bit of the prayer, and that's not like a gay prayer where you talk about your feelings or whatever. It's just like the ritual words, you know what I mean? Hail Mary, full of grace, whatever. Yeah. And then a lot of Irish teachers. Yeah. From a historical perspective, I was given very much the Catholic when we did the Northern Ireland conflict as part of GCSE history, and my history teacher was a member of Opus Dei.
Wow! Right,
and he was from Salford and Catholic Irish background, and so I was very much given the Irish perspective. And looking back on it, I have quite a positive view of Catholicism. Because of that, they weren't dogmatic or anything. You just had to go to mass every so often. So, but of course, you rebel against it, and so you're an atheist or whatever. And so, therefore, religion becomes fascinating because you're surrounded by these religious people, at least these ritualistically religious people. And so you think, well, what's going on? What is the nature of their mind? So that's one of the reasons I was attracted to it. But they were very laid back, though. I don't know. I mean, so you've got these people that, on the one hand, we can't celebrate Red Nose Day at school because Red Nose Day are giving money to an abortion charity. So that's out. But on the other hand, they're perfectly happy to book the sixth form, some who are aged between 16 and 18, some club, and make sure that the 16-year-olds are served booze such that they get catalytic. And that's fine.
Yeah.
So it was, and there were three. There was a girls' school and a boys' school, and that were mixed in the sixth form. There were 3 priests at each school, right? And only one of those priests was ever convicted for paedophilia.
Only one.
Not 6, like people stereotypically think.
Just one.
Just the one.
So that's,
1 in 6.
That's negative.
That's fewer than 20% now.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, what's that?
Yeah.
You know, that's only. I mean, so.
So
you know,
yeah, you've got to take the rough with the
take
smooth.
off the smooth.
What I was thinking is you weren't a fan of religion, but you chose theology because
To understand why? Understand its nature. We were at that time anyway. I mean, I think less so now. But 20 years ago, or when I was a kid anyway, we were at the fag end of a conservative Christian society.
Yeah.
And so Christianity was still central to a lot of what was going on. And we had an older generation who are all dead now, born in the 20s and 30s, all of whom all of whom believed in God and were Church of England or Catholic or whatever. And so it was very, very significant to what we were experiencing in a way that it's perhaps not so much people that are 20 years younger than me. And so that was fascinating. It was a central thing. And so I think that was one of the many attractions to theology.
It denotes a certain antagonism, though, within you that you didn't believe in theology. You were a diehard nihilistic atheist, and you're like, I'm going to go into the enemy camp and study what they think.
But I think if you're a diehard nihilistic atheist, then on some level, perhaps precisely because you're diehard, you have doubts.
Right.
And that's almost what the diehard is, the person that is so pronounced and fervent in their atheism that I mean, my nickname when I was at university was Atheist Ed. I was like an evangelical atheist, and such a person probably has doubts.
Yeah.
And so, which I did, and so you're creating an identity, and so therefore it's fascinating for that reason as well. So there's this love-hate relationship, or what I don't. That's too simplistic, but there's this tension.
Yeah.
Which makes you attracted to exploring it.
Would you still call yourself an atheist now?
Yeah, I mean, I believe in God sometimes. That's the honest truth.
When it's a good day, do you believe in God? Or?
Probably one of its bad day.
If it's a bad day.
Like now, not so much. There's nothing really, you know. But I imagine that if a nuclear bomb suddenly hits someone, I can imagine. You know,
start praying.
Yeah, start. Yeah. I mean, let's be honest about that.
I need it back.
Yeah. He suddenly comes back, you know, like an elderly maiden aunt who doesn't really like to talk about sex or anything interesting, but she's there when you need her, you know. Like. Do you believe in God?
I can't believe naively in God. I can't do it. I've tried. I think my life would be easier, and we know from the research, don't we, that there are benefits to a religious belief. But naively believing in some all-powerful being is just there's no data that supports that.
No, it's a cognitive bias that seems to be quite strongly heritable, actually, like maybe even as much as 0.7 heritable, religious experience anyway, which some people have more and some people have less of, but which is clearly adaptive. That if you have a homunculus on your shoulder telling you to be well behaved, then you're less likely to be cast out by the band of kills it's selected for. It reduces stress, and also it hits in at times of stress and thus reduces stress. So it's a useful adaptation to have.
Cultures that are more religious are generally stronger and more cohesive as well, aren't they? So I was watching a Dawkins interview the other day. I can't remember who with, and he said something that hurt my feelings. He said, people who think that everyone else should be religious but they don't need to be, that's a patronizing point of view. But that is literally my point of view. I think religion and belief in God is necessary. I can't do it, but I think for a culture, for a society, it's better if people believe in God.
Yes, I mean, it's the evidence is that the people are more pro-social if they believe they are being watched.
Yeah.
And if you genuinely believe you are being watched, and you are by God, then you are more pro-social. Also, belief in God tends to be wrapped up with everything else which is adaptive, including promoting being group-oriented.
Right.
And therefore the religion promotes that. And then once that happens, then you start competitively signaling your group orientation.
Yeah.
And so you end up with a much more cohesive society, and also a society that has a sense of its own eternal importance.
Right.
And therefore people can be induced to fight and die for that society. And so on all these, and a society that gets together occasionally and has uniting liminal rituals which induce a dissipation of a sense of self into something greater. And so you can see all kinds of benefits to it. You know, I am not a Mormon, but I would quite happily go and live in Utah where everybody else is. Lovely place, lovely people.
Nice people.
I'm not a Mormon,
but
I've been to Utah, and I'd happily be a Jack Mormon.
Right.
i.e. a Mormon sympathizer.
Yeah.
You know, I've realised as I get older, no, I want other people to be religious, and if that's patronising, I can't do anything about it. I can't do anything about it. In the same way that I might want other people, I'm not practical and I have no desire to do any DIY.
Right.
But I want other people to be able to do that.
So would you agree with Dawkins' criticism? So we have a similar position on this, that our position is kind of patronising.
Well, patronising to whom? Who will be patronising?
We're saying, listen, you moron peasants, I don't need God.
Yeah.
Because I can be good without a supreme being. I can be conscientious and cohesive in groups, but you can't because you're morons.
No, well, that may well be patronising, but I think as we get older, let's be frank, it's quite obvious that some people are much more intelligent than other people.
Yeah.
And when people are not particularly intelligent and don't have particularly good impulse control, then if they are inculcated with that's why we inculcate children with religiosity. If they are inculcated with these kinds of pro-social religious ideas, then they will behave better.
Yeah.
And if you take those away from them, then you just have people. This is almost certainly why the English working class or underclass has utterly degenerated in the absence of religion.
Yes.
In a way that the middle class hasn't.
Yes.
So the middle class, okay, religion has died, or not died, but it's on life support. And the people that are middle class are still genetically highly intelligent, high in conscientiousness, high in agreeableness, and so they're still getting along in life, even in the absence of religion.
Yeah.
If you get people that are not very intelligent, not very agreeable, and not very conscientious, then in the absence of religion, they just degenerate into free-for-all chaos. So it's ridiculous to call it patronising. It's just empirically a reasonable argument. And Richard Dawkins. I don't understand how someone so manifestly intelligent as him can have such a blind spot when it comes to religion. First of all, he doesn't seem to accept that religion is an evolved cognitive bias. He thinks it's an accidental consequence of other things that are adaptive. But that's manifestly nonsense because we know there's a heritability to religiosity. It has all the different components of an adaptation. It's found in all cultures. It's highly heritable. It's associated with fertility. It's associated with mental health. It's associated with physical health. It's associated with group orientation. It's associated with specific parts of the brain. If you stimulate them with magnets, you become more religious. It's an instinct that hits it at times of stress. It has all of the components of an adaptation, and it's evidently central for a society. If you want that space that he wants, where he can do his scientific research and whatever, then you need to have a society that will keep away the enemies at the gate. You need to have people that will lay down their lives for the society. And religion is and the idea of the eternal is very important to persuading people to do that. And so I think Richard Dawkins is. He's the kind of person that if you were a 16-year-old nihilist, as I was, then you'd think he was great, as I did.
Yeah.
But then if you actually grow up, which I don't think he has, I think he's stuck somewhere.
That's what I was going to ask you next. Do you think his rejection, his wholesale rejection of religion and the necessity for religion, do you think it has like a pathological flavour to it? There's something in there that's.
Well, he's so dogmatic about it. I think if it's a bit. I mean, you've done all this therapy work with people about narcissism and whatever, and these are very damaged people. Although they are people that, at least with the vulnerable narcissist, I suppose, at certain points, I think I'm right. I think I would borderline personality sort of people. They can have moments of awareness where you really can make them understand, you know?
Yes.
But then they will flip back to the self-protection mechanism of, oh no, I didn't have a borderline personality disorder, psychotic episode. No, my stresses and anxieties are genuine and reasonable.
Yes.
But then sometimes they'll understand, no, they're not.
Yes.
And the behaviour you've just engaged in of completely devaluing me and making out I'm evil.
Yes.
And then there's this long pause, and then you're like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that.
Yes.
That was something odd,
Yeah.
weird, right? That's no matter how much stress you're under. That's and they have these moments where they understand that, oh, I wish I didn't have to do that. And if you get to know me well, you'll see that side of me. And I wish I feel I can't have intimate relationships because they'll always see that side of me, and it'll always come back. It'll always come back like some slapped, belted child that tries to turn you into itself.
Yeah.
Rip you apart, make you feel confused and hated, right? Like that. And they can have these moments of understanding. And I think that's, I just think that it strikes me that of self-awareness. And if anyone is extreme like that, then often it's you're creating a strong identity because you have got some hole somewhere. And so you need to create this strong sense of certainty of who you are to overcompensate for the fact that deep down there is, this term we've had trouble defining, there is this lack in the clear sense of self, and you're always self-doubting and wondering and so on. And that's why you create an extreme sense of identity. And that's what he's done.
You think it's compensation?
Overcompensation for, on some level, a sense of self-doubt, a sense of not being sure where he fits into things, a sense of a weak sense of self. So you create a superficially to yourself a strong sense of self, but the self-doubt comes in. It's expressed in the fervor, and that's what you see with Dawkins. And so I do think to myself, on some level, is he sort of stuck on some part of himself? I mean, I didn't know the guy. I just psychoanalyze him or something. But as a sort of angry 16-year-old, or even tantruming 3-year-old, he's never kind of got past something.
I watched him an interview with Ricky Gervais, and they were having it was a joking, informal interview about atheism and about science, and the way someone like Gervais or Dawkins can understand science and nature, it is almost religious. It has this religious component to it, I felt, which is fine. It's not a criticism. The way they could talk about the scope and the vastness of the universe, and in order for evolution to take place, all that genetic mutation, there's a vastness of time that is beyond human comprehension. We can't. And I was like, well, in the end, maybe they do have their own religiosity or their own faith that serves a function of inducing awe and gratitude, and keeps the ego under control. I wondered if that was what was happening.
So what do you mean? How does it keep the ego under control?
Sorry, I should go back. So you asked me if I believe in God, and what I didn't say. I'm very convinced. I was very convinced by Dostoevsky's Brothers Karamazov and Nietzsche writing in the similar time period around the 1880s, and they must have been reading each other's work, or Nietzsche must have read Dostoevsky at least. This whole God is dead. We have killed him. What are we going to do in the absence of God? What festivals and rituals will we create to absolve ourselves of guilt is largely what Nietzsche said. Dostoevsky and the Brothers Karamazov said, look, we're losing God in Russia. The Orthodox Church is being worn away. Our mystics are being taken away. And they both seem to have this position that, roughly speaking, in human psychology, there's a hierarchy, and at the top, there should be God. And if there isn't God there, we put ourselves there. It's like the birth of broad-scale narcissism. So then God is a kind of, in this sense, if we're talking purely psychology, is a mechanism that holds the human ego in place and stops it dilating too far in that way.
Stops it worshipping itself.
Yes.
So this idea that I think that we have at the moment, that it's almost Gnostic, that if you can define yourself, and that's what we're being told we can do. We say, we're like God. It says somewhere in the Bible, I am what I am, or whatever it says. I am that I am, yeah. And so this idea that we can define ourselves. If I say I'm a woman, I am a woman. And if I say tomorrow I'm black, I am black. Although apparently that's crossing a border. But I'm
You're not allowed to do that.
I can't do that yet. Not yet. You can say you're Korean.
Okay.
You could self-identify as Korean because that's not interfering with the grievance system.
Right.
So I am a woman, or I whatever.
Yeah.
And so we are almost chinks of divine light in an evil Gnostic world of darkness.
Yeah.
And that define ourselves. We are gods. We are gods. We are the people that built the Tower of Babel and become like one of us. We have eaten from the tree of knowledge of good and evil and have become like one of us. We are gods. But then there are these evil devil gods that doubt that and say there's such a thing as objective truth and say that no, whatever. So they're sort of evil chinks of light. I don't know what they are, chinks of super darkness.
Yeah.
And they have to be fought against and destroyed.
Yeah.
And I suppose that is that's kind of what's happened. We now we have become God.
Yeah.
I see what you mean. Yes. But unfortunately now in making that digression, I have forgotten.
I was saying that Gervais and Dawkins seem
yeah,
to be
well,
capable of creating
Yeah,
a
that's a
faith.
good point. So I was thinking, what immediately occurred to me there was the idea of neo-Thomism. So this idea that the attitudes of the scholastics was that our purpose is to understand the world in natural philosophy, i.e. science, natural theology rather, i.e. science, is to understand the nature of God's creation. And therefore to lie about the nature of God's creation is like blasphemous.
Okay.
And it's as though the traditional universities developed along those lines. So that's Thomism. And so
Who's
Thomas Aquinas.
Ah,
And so then neo-Thomas, come on, surely as a good Catholic boy, you've heard of Thomas Aquinas.
I have. I've never heard of Thomism.
And
Is it too hard to say Aquinasism?
yes. So neo-Thomas is this idea that the universities have maintained that fundamental worship of truth and idea that it is basically blasphemous, up until recently anyway, it is basically blasphemous to lie, even though the belief in God sort of died off. So they've maintained this fundamental worship of truth and this fundamental idea that it is our moral and religious duty to comprehend the nature of God's creation.
Okay.
And perhaps that's what Gervais and Dawkins are reflecting.
It's that same heritage kind
But
of
it
thing.
could be argued that eventually it gets to a point where you have to ask, well, what, and it's a sort of traditionalist philosophy question, what verifies something as truth? And in the Platonic worldview, it's, well, look, there's this world of forms, and our world is a reflection of the eternal world of forms. But fundamentally, there is a demiurge that overarches that. And it could be argued that, well, what makes you believe in the truth? Why do you believe in the truth? Why is the truth so important? How do you know it's the truth? How do you know that empirical reality is what you say it is? And the argument is, well, there must be some sort of unchanging something. That verifies something as true. And the traditionalist argument is that this is a kind of implicit religion. Implicitly, when you're saying, I believe, we need to know the truth about the world. Why? Or we just do. Well, why? Well, because it's a good in itself. Well, why is it a good in itself? Well, to know all this theoretical stuff about the nature of the world, surely it's good to have some comforting lies, isn't it? And you can counter, well, no, because something in us means we must understand the truth. Well, what? And that gets us back to this idea that you are revealing the revelation of something, that there's something higher, something eternal.
So when you were giving that mock dialogue just there, you actually sounded like the key coordinates that I heard in the Dawkins-Gervais debate. This seems very important to them. So they're actually engaged maybe in neo-Thomism. That's interesting.
Very possibly.
Very possibly.
So I think also there was a scholar, obscure scholar called Edward Bailey, and he came up with this, he was a vicar, and he came up with this idea of implicit religion, the idea that people will say they're an atheist, but when you talk to them, you can sort of analyze their wording. They'll say things like, well, at the end of the day, well, what do you mean by that? Let's get behind that. So you're seeing life. Life is a metaphor, and it's like a day. And at the end of the day, you've got to do this. Well, why?
Yeah.
And what it gets back to is that there are certain unchanging truths. So certain things that are just true.
Yes.
And what makes those things true? Well, nothing. They just are true. And the implication is there are certain eternal truths, and that takes us into a kind of almost metaphysical universe.
Right.
And that's the other, I suppose, the other theodicy could be to say, well, I value civilization. In order for civilization to be preserved, there has to be a fundamental sense of the truth and that you shouldn't lie and whatever. In order for that to be the case, if you believe in God and God says that you shouldn't lie, then you do that. So therefore, we want other people to believe in God, as you just said, you did yourself. Yeah. And therefore, shouldn't we, via effortful control, somehow force ourselves to believe in God?
That's my position.
And I was interviewing an interesting guy called Nick Dixon on the Jolly Heretic recently, and I was on his channel actually, and he was telling me about this, that he basically decided that it's good to believe in God. There are benefits. I will try and force myself to believe in God. In the same way that perhaps if you're in a relationship and it's flagging a bit, and you force yourself to remind yourself of how much you used to love her once, and then you love her again. I don't know. So,
wanking the limp penis of your faith.
That is an excellent. That should perhaps be a title for the next Richard Grannon, the first Richard Grannon theology book. Yeah. Wanking the limp penis of your faith. I can imagine that on sale in a Christian bookshop.
Oh God!
And now on Thought for the Day, we have Richard Grannon, author of Wanking the Limp Penis of Your Faith. Richard, why do you feel that a semi-erection is an appropriate metaphor for religiosity in the modern world? Because then if you believe in God more, then it becomes fully tumescent, and the ejaculate of faith. The ejaculate of faith is produced and spreads its salty light around.
Oh God!
Into the mouth of the universe. The mouth of the secular universe. Swallows in that faith. Spits some of it out because the faith is so much faith. Swallows the faith. And it moves mountain. Calm.
Well, that was traumatic.
Now we're back to that young man there, that broken narcissist.
I'll see if I could get Gervais to write the foreword for that one. Oh God. Yes. Now then.
Now then. Speaking of sexual weirdness. Now then. Boys and girls. There was one of you that wanted to come on the show. Do you want me to fix it for you to believe in God?
Oh dear. Yes.
I think the cameraman's going to sort of break. I'm thinking that when he cuts this, which is the term he uses, he's going to break at this point. At this point, he's going to.
Yes.
Where were we anyway?
Very good.
So university, Durham. And Old Testament. That was great.
What was the even I've told you in the interview you did with me, even though I didn't enjoy the behavioural psychology degree, there were things I took away from it. What was taken away from the degree?
I suppose some of the lecturers, I mean, these are people that were born in the 40s, so these were people that were actually, to some extent, believed in academic values rather than the nonsense they have now.
Okay.
And for example, Professor Davis, who was also the master of my college, on the first day when he just said, look, some of you will find all of your ideas questioned and stuff, and that's the purpose of being here.
Okay.
That's why you're here. And to have all of your ideas questioned.
Jesus, some intellectual rigor.
That's the point of it here. If you don't like that, you shouldn't be here.
Wonderful.
So there was that. So I took that away from it.
Yeah.
I think I took away. They taught you how to think more critically via specific methods. They would tell you how to do this, defining terms, unpacking them in detail, a nuanced thought. That's what they were teaching, at least with my degree.
Yeah.
And so that was useful. And then after Durham, I became absolutely fascinated by fundamentalism when I was at university.
Really?
Because a third of the corridor were members of the Christian Union, which was the fundamentalist Christian group. And there was this weird tension, or number of tensions. On the one hand, there was the tension that they were extremely nice people, but yet they believed you're going to go to hell, and they believed all of this. They didn't believe in evolution. Some of them didn't believe in dinosaurs. They thought that the devil placed the fake bones there to confuse the non-believer and lead them away from Christ. But then they were also some of my best friends, and in some cases remain some of my best friends. And there was also, and I've talked to other people about this, there was also a sort of a sexual tension, which is that these Christian girls, very kind, very genuine, very, very pretty in a kind of pure, honest way. And so you end up in the, and they can't have sexual relationships with the Christian men, because that's all, they're part of sort of almost not a cult, that's the wrong word, but a religious group
Sect.
that has very strong rules about sexual activity.
Yeah.
And so you ended up, and a lot of people I talked to about this at my university and others like Oxford, which is the same thing, you'd have these almost like pseudo-sexual relationships between non-Christian men and Christian girls.
Okay.
So there was that element.
When you say pseudo-sexual, you mean it was sexual but limited?
Yeah, so they wouldn't actually have sex.
You could do stuff, but
things,
not other things, yeah.
A lot of touching and things that you wouldn't.
Frottage.
Yeah, a lot of things that you would, kissing or whatever, and even things beyond that you just wouldn't, like now, you look back on it now, and you think, God, well, that was basically a sort of sexual relationship, wasn't it? I mean, kind of. But then it was just a sort of, oh, well, you didn't even think about it.
Right.
But I thought at the time that was just me. But no, that was loads of people that were in that situation.
Right.
With these girls. So, and non-Christian girls with Christian boys. Same thing. So that was, I found them absolutely fascinating. And at the end of the degree, I didn't know what I wanted to do for a living. The three things I thought about were academic, journalist, or very liberal vicar. Like vicar that doesn't believe in God. So what do you do if you've got a theology degree, for Christ's sake? So
do you be the super progressive vicar?
So what are you supposed to do?
Yeah.
So I thought, what do I do? And so I thought I could do a master's degree, and my parents agreed to fund me to do the master's degree. But then I got funding from the University of Aberdeen. It was he wanted it to be a full doctorate, or some funding from them. And so that's where I went. And then
what was it? Was it still theology? Or?
Yeah, divinity department. But it was a field work, anthropological analysis of fundamentalist Christian student groups. And so I would immerse myself in, almost like live as one of them. They do things like on a Saturday morning, it'd be Christian Union football. And it was just like a normal football match, except that whereas in a normal football match, the manager, bollocks you all at half time or revs you up or whatever, you pray to do better in the second half. God, guide my foot to this football at a particular angle, such that it curls into the goal. Amen. And so it was a whole different culture. There were two cultures at Durham University that were new to me, at least two, but two main ones. The one was just the English nobility and aristocracy, people from private school, full stop. But then more specifically, public school, this whole culture that they had. Separate culture. There's different clothes. They talked, and I was very artistic when I was. So I wrote plays, had play at the Edinburgh Festival, wrote comedy sketches for the Durham Review, wrote poetry, and they all like that. They don't write that themselves. They're not very creative, the upper class, but they like the sort of the lower classes that are creative. They're like, oh, yeah, I saw your play. It was fantastic. Yeah, it was really good. Hey, yeah, you should come to the party. Me and Charlie Blair, we're having a party. Charlie Blair's got some cigars in from Cuba. Totally come. It's great. We have some really, really big, juicy steaks. Come along. Yeah. And Harry H.P. will be there, and Harry A.J. and Harry B.J. and whatever. and then so there was that culture, but then there was this Christian culture, which sort of imbricated the upper middle class. It was quite middle class, but not that they weren't like the top people.
Sorry, just to interrupt you for a second. It sounds like. Though you are not a man of faith, you feel quite a lot of affection for people who have faith.
Yeah, my wife's a vicar, so I mean,
you're warm and to just Christians or people. But
it's like you said, I want to live in a society where other people believe in God, and that society extends even to my own house.
Okay.
And my own, bed where I sleep.
Yeah.
I want to
God
live. God
is there whether you want him or not.
I want to live in a society where other people believe in God fervently.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I have to.
Yeah.
But I used to be that I would just wankerishly question their beliefs and whatever. And then I guess it's a rebellion against what's in power. And what was in power when we were kids was still the Christian Anglican society.
Yes.
And so then I'm against that, and I'll question it, and I'll pull it apart and whatever. And then when I realised, in my early 20s, when I was a postgraduate, and I understood almost viscerally under New Labour and whatever, that it was that they were no longer in power, and there was a new power in the land, which was the woke. and that's restricting your freedom, and that's lying to you, and then suddenly you start to think
there's a new enemy.
This is the enemy, and that's what I've thought ever since. Whereas when I was an undergraduate, I wasn't quite aware of that, and so I wasn't politically controversial or anything. Okay, I was a member of the Conservative Party, and so I was right wing. As almost all students are left wing, but nothing beyond that. I wasn't looking into. Well, of course, we were a less polarized society. There was no internet, so you couldn't really look into these things. But I wasn't looking into things like race. I had briefly as a teenager. I wrote this when it was coming up to the '97 election, and I became fascinated by that. And I got the phone book and I rang up all these political parties and got them to send me their information pack, and I wrote a pamphlet about it, and then sold it around the school 50p a pop. It was my first venture into publishing, so a lot of teachers bought it.
Yeah.
And I wrote, one of them I wrote was BNP, and they had a bookshop, and there was books with titles like, I think the books for sale, titles like "Did 6 Million Really Die?" I remember I bought that. That was like £1, and then one was called The Biology of the Race Problem, and then one was called IQ and Racial Difference. I bought all three of those books. All of those. I was like, wow. For some reason, at that age, I was able to suppress that information and not really talk about it much.
Right.
Except that when we were doing GCSE English, we had to do as part of this an oral presentation, and you could do it on anything you wanted. So, and I thought, well, I'll do it on this book about the Holocaust didn't happen. And my teacher had no problem with that. She was like, yeah, fine. Imagine that now, if you've done a presentation on how the Holocaust didn't happen. Wow. And in the end, I didn't. In the end, I did it on the music of 17th century playwright and wit Thomas Durfee. But I was going to do it on that. She had no problem with that. And I remember we were on the train coming back from a school exhibition, an exhibition in, I don't know, some school trip. And this old teacher called Mrs. Rotherham, said to Miss Douglas, they were talking about me in front of me. So, what's Edward doing his presentation on? And Miss Douglas said, he's doing it on the evidence that the Holocaust never happened. And Miss Rotherham, she just looks at me like...
Terrifying.
But obviously I did. It did happen. But yeah, it was an interesting thing to read anyway.
So have you been your whole life on the right?
Yeah, I would say so, and probably for quite ridiculous reasons actually. So I remember, I don't know how old I was, 7 or 8. In the Roald Dahl book, Revolting Rhymes, and it says that a judge would say without a blink, 10 years hard labour in the clink. So I said to my mum, what's labour? What does that mean? And she said, well, it's like, like breaking rocks, like really horribly hard work. And I was like, what? And I'm thinking, well, there's this party called the Labour Party. Well, that's what they want us to do. They sound awful.
The party of punishment.
And there were other things about them that disgusted me, like their leader was ginger and bald and Welsh.
You're talking about Mr. Kinnock.
Yeah. So like, he talked funny, he was bald, and he was wet, and he was ginger. I was like, ugh. And they want us to do all this Labour stuff. Oh my God. I never want there to be a Labour government.
Right.
And then my parents voted Conservative anyway, and they would tell me about how terrible it was in the 70s and all this sort of thing. And so these sort of, and then just my general hatred of change, which I've always hated.
Yeah.
And so these things came together to and of just people that are obviously lying and manipulative, which Tony Blair, whatever, it just so clearly was. They went from being just a bunch of incompetents, basically. Roy Hattersley, a fat, spitting man, like just bad PR, to these sleek, manipulative little serpents. And so no, I just knew this is bad news. This is bad news, and it was, of course, terrible. The worst thing that ever happened to Britain, I think. How
would you define your political stance today?
You get left-wing journalists ask me that annoying question, and I just say a 19th century British imperialist, or a very, very, very high Tory, so high that you get sort of altitude sickness.
A British imperialist. You want to bring the empire back?
Yes. Not only me. I mean, I was talking. My son, at his nursery school, had this Anglo-Indian teacher, and he was saying to me that when he was a kid in the 70s, a lot of old people in India missed the empire.
Yes.
And they would talk about this. They would say life was much better. It was much more organised. There was no corruption. life was just better under the British. They're all dead now, but they pined after that. It was a better time. So it's not just. And in Kenya, I was talking to I forget her name, but this Kenyan academic, and she was saying to me much the same thing. When she was a kid, a lot of older Kenyans missed the empire. Of course, it's better with the British are running things. Of course, it is. And not the British now, not like the cucked, stupid British, but the British of our grandparents' generation.
Right.
Of course, it's better if the British are running things.
You said the cucked British.
The British now, where the most British people.
Do you feel it's a cucked country?
Yeah, of course it is. It's a degenerate country which promotes degeneracy and individualism and sexual degeneracy and woke values that have seeped so far into the fabric of society. I mean, I was in Crewe in Cheshire in the summer. Like the car rental place, enterprise, is itself religiously sanctioned with the rainbow flag, like everywhere. There were pubs in Crewe that were flying the rainbow flag, and this is like a working class town. So it's gone down in terms of the virtue signalling that far. It's in terms of the Simmel's trickle effect. It's seeped into the very nature of the whole culture in a way that in Finland, or at least where I live in Finland, it hasn't. And people still have a sense that we're Finns and we need to survive as a people, and we're under threat from outsiders, and we are unique and we are special and we are important and we need to survive and we need to make sacrifices to survive. And they have a compulsory, or not compulsory, but they have it's very strongly socially important. Like if you're a man and you apply for a job, you will put on your CV that you've done military service, and you will put on your CV what rank you attained in military service, and you will take the view rightly that a lot of people will judge you badly if you have not done military service. If you've done the sort of, they call it civilipalvelus, civil service. I call it homopalvelus. But this idea that you, instead of doing the military service, you do this civil service where they give you a job, I don't know, working in a library for no money or whatever.
Same option in Israel, isn't it?
Right. Well, like that there's a substantial segment of people, even of my age, that regard that with derision. And so as a man, it is, I don't know about in Helsinki. Helsinki is just degenerate. But I mean, out in northern Finland, that you've got to do military service or you're pathetic.
So I heard you say that the country has a strong sense of self, it has a strong sense of its own future, its own individuality.
In some part, I mean, that's decreasing. That's decreasing, obviously. I mean, basically, Finland does everything that England does about 30 years later.
And you would think that Britain would do well to have some of that vision back?
Yes.
Is that a fundamentally racist position to adopt?
I think the problem with that word racist is that it's one of these shut-up terms. It's one of these indefinite terms, like powerful emotional terms, like witch in the 17th century, or papist, or something like that, which can be elasticated to basically take in absolutely any deviance from the orthodox position at all. That's the point of it. It's to connect any deviance from the orthodox position to something fundamentally evil, and thereby reprove you and push any potential doubters back onto the path of orthodoxy. So I just think we just shouldn't use those terms. But is it fundamentally, we know from research by, I don't know, Putnam, for example, or Tatu Vanhanen, that societies that are multicultural, that are multiracial, multi-ethnic, are riven by division. They are low in social trust. They are low in common goods. They do not stay together. They balkanize. Tatu Vanhanen found that 66% of the variance between nations in internal conflict is basically caused by being multi-ethnic. Right. So you cannot have a united multicultural society. There's no such thing. And Finland is probably about 96% white. And so it's in a position where it can still be like that. Whereas Britain is about less than 80% white, and it's so, you've got to a position now where you have an Indian prime minister, you have various other non-native British within the government and within all kinds of positions of power, and you end up with just a balkanized society. So there is a Britain, but the level of when that happens, the level of social trust is reduced even among the natives, because they rightly perceive that other natives will collaborate against them with the foreigners to gain individual power, which of course they do. I mean, the whole coalition of the Labour Party is the working class white vote and the ethnic vote. About 65% of Muslims in the UK vote Labour. So, or 70% is it. It's a coalition. A very good example of that is George Galloway's Respect Party. I mean, it's basically George Galloway, white leader, and then foreigners.
Yeah.
So you can't have that. And so in Finland at the moment, you're seeing it changing. Like you'll see TV commercials where there's 6 Finns socialising, eating crisps, and there's one black man. Right. Well, of course, in Finland it would be one white person, one black person. In England, one white person, one black person, one Asian person. Like, it would be nonsense. It would be just nonsense.
Or no white people at all.
There's no white people at all. Yeah. Or a white woman and a black man. But in Finland, no, you're seeing what we saw in the 90s, which was the subtle little, we'll put a little representative non-white, but not in a position of power, not unrealistic, but we'll just put one here, and make out it's normal. And in Finland, it's not normal.
Okay.
It's not. I don't know, but I can't comment on Helsinki, but in Oulu, I don't know. I don't know Finns that have, in Oulu, that have non-white friends.
I have to ask you a couple of knowingly stupid questions about racism.
Oh yeah.
But I agree with your comment that the way we use racism today is so overstretched it's become bordering on meaningless, and it really is largely used just to corral people back into the orthodoxy and shame them for stepping outside the orthodoxy. But racism is a real phenomena in the world. I'm sure you'd agree. What's a useful definition of racism?
Well, that's the problem. The problem is that when the term, it's like if we, I mean, there may have been a time when, I'm trying to think of an example. Well, I can think of a very good example. So there was a time when the word idiot was a scientific term and it meant something quite specific.
Yes.
And there was a time when the word lunatic was a scientific term and it meant something quite specific. And so you could say to me, well, what's a useful definition of idiot? And I think, as I recall, idiot is somebody that's just congenitally stupid.
Yeah.
Whereas lunatic was somebody who's normal and then they have a mental problem and they become weird and mental and crazy,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
So that's the useful definition. What it then becomes is a form of insult where you encompass anything that deviates from the intelligence norm. Oh, you're an idiot. You've said something incorrect. You're an idiot, right? So you could push the definition of idiot back to meaning a person who basically for genetic reasons or due to brain damage early in childhood has low IQ.
Yep.
But the problem is that word idiot still has so many emotional connotations that realistically you should probably, if you want to have a civilized, objective academic discussion, just stop using the word idiot, which of course we have. And we use the word mentally retarded. Then the same thing happened to retarded. And so now we say, I don't know what it is these days, mentally challenged, or I don't know what the term is. And then off, it just carries on.
Differently abled or...
Well, whatever, yeah. So it's the same with the word racist. It's become the new, almost like a swear word. And so we probably just shouldn't use it. But if we have to use it, I would say that racism is to discriminate against somebody as an individual on the basis of their race. And that is something that I personally don't do.
Okay.
And people, you get people that watch The Jolly Heretic or whatever, that some people that are certainly rather, how can I put this, a tad dogmatic, should we say, who object to the fact that I have had Lipton Matthews, who's Jamaican, on, and I will have him on, and I'll have him on again, because he's highly intelligent and says very intelligent, interesting things, and I don't care if he's Jamaican.
So there are white followers of yours who don't want you to have non-white guests?
I'm afraid there are, some, yeah. And I think that's a balance that all of us that are seen as dissident, whatever, on the right, academics, YouTubers, I've talked to others about this. And we have the same problem. An element among your followership are woke but right-wing. They're the right-wing equivalent of woke.
Meaning dogmatic,
extreme, yeah, all that. They're everything that is woke. But
emotionally dysregulated.
Yeah, probably high neuroticism. Probably high in psychopathic traits, where and that's just a fact of life. We all know this. People like AA or probably we all know this is true. And the people like Fuentes in real life, I'm sure, would be perfectly polite and reasonable to somebody of any racial group. Yeah. And so we know this is true. I mean, I got a lot of stick a while ago because I had this person on the channel, Evelyn Grant, who is a homosexual transsexual. not an autodidaphilous transsexual, a homosexual transsexual, i.e. that they're a highly feminine, born a highly feminine, because autodidaphilous transsexuals are masculinized men that have a sexual fetish, which is associated with autism, which is associated with being masculinized, where they are sexually aroused by the idea of themselves as a woman. That's autodidaphilous transsexual. Homosexual transsexual is that you are a very, very, very feminized man, such that you basically think of yourself as a female, and then you have the relevant operations, and then you have a boyfriend. Whereas the autodidaphilous transsexuals are overwhelmingly, they become women and they're lesbians.
Right, they still want women.
Right. So anyway, this person happens to have quite interesting views and interesting background and whatever, and so I had Evelyn on, and a lot of people got very upset about this. But I see no reason to discriminate. I would call, if you're going to say how do you define, I don't know, transphobia. That's how I would. The idea that I will not speak to you because you are transsexual. I will speak to you.
Yeah.
Or I will not speak to you because you're gay. No, I will speak to you.
Yeah.
So that's the racism. It should be that you will discriminate against. You will basically say, I'm not going to come to this dinner party if you invite that black person.
Right.
Right.
That's racist.
That's surely.
Yeah. So when people, stupid question. Why do people accuse you of being racist?
Well, people. I mean, you mean the far left and the people that are the enforcers of orthodoxy and the people that gain their power by competitively being enforcers of the orthodoxy. Because there's a number of levels on which you can ask that. What they would say is something like, I am looking at race differences, and I'm looking at race differences in intelligence and personality and whatever, and that's racist. No, I'm saying that's not racist. I'm not discriminating against anybody. I'm just looking at the objective data. But their attitude is that to even suggest that is perhaps upsetting to non-whites, which it isn't. I mean, I've interviewed black people. They're not upset about it. They feel patronised that you would say to them, I will not talk to you about this because you're black.
Yeah.
I talk, and there's evidence that the left change how they talk to non-whites. They patronise them. Yes. I talk to everybody the same, including children and dogs, and just treat them with individual respect. So they've no justification on that definition. No, they've expanded the definition, which is racism is that you deviate from our orthodoxy on race. Our orthodoxy is there are no race differences in intelligence, or personality, or whatever, or even that race doesn't exist as a concept, except when it does, when we want to say that we need more black organ donors or whatever. Then something does exist, but anyway, they're not consistent. So that's why I'm racist. And another level which you could look at it is they are narcissists. Narcissists like power and authority over other people, and I am challenging them and saying they're idiots, basically, and they're wrong, and they're liars, and they're disingenuous.
Yep.
And so they don't like that.
Yep.
They are Machiavellian, and their power base is that there is this morality, and based around not looking at certain topics and whatever, and they are enforcing that, and my research perhaps has the potential to undermine that, and thus undermine what gives them power, undermine their niche, remove them.
Yes.
And therefore you are a danger and you need to be suppressed. But I mean, to put it in the terms that you use in your podcast, I am committing unto them narcissistic injury by challenging them and challenging the thing which allows them to paper over the cracks in their sort of shattered sense of self and say, I'm morally superior to others, I'm better than others, or whatever, I'm better than others. And they are projecting onto me that their deep-seated doubts about the ideology which they are telling themselves is true in order to give themselves a clear moral sense of self. And they deep down, they do feel racist feelings or whatever, feelings that they want to be. They know they want to be with their own type. People that are left wing are almost essentially no more likely to have non-white friends than people that are right wing.
And this is the research.
Yeah. Ultimately, if you look at, let's judge a person by their behaviour. Let's do it like that. Right. If you live in London, it's 50% non-white. So you should have 50% non-white friends. And if you don't, you're a racist.
Right.
Why not?
Yeah. Why not?
Why not? The only thing I can think of is that you are attracted to genetic similarity. You're discriminating unconsciously against non-whites. You're racist.
Yeah.
Right. So these people know on some level, I think, that they are racist, and they hate that side of themselves because it causes cognitive dissonance, and therefore, how do you deal with it? You project it onto these evil racists, who in fact aren't racist, because I have. One thing I said to somebody once, one of these leftists, I said, you have all your friends are white. I have friends that are Indian, I have friends that are black, I have friends from all over the place. And he said, well, that's exactly the kind of argument a racist would use. So it's like, how can you win? I'm showing you another one said to me, I am so secure that I am not a racist, that I don't need to have non-white friends.
Yes, you can't even really argue against that kind of...
Just self-deluding.
It's delusional, yeah.
Yeah, people are, whether they like it or not, people operate in their genetic interests. If you are attracted, and people are, as white people, I mean, it's just a fact, more likely to be attracted to people that not just of their own race, but that are even within the European, more similar to them. There is almost like a narcissistic element to sexual attraction. Ironically, among the least narcissistic people, among the people that are K strategists, because if you're evolved to an unstable yet difficult environment, then you need the gene complexes, which mean that you are adapted to those to the pathogens in that environment to not break up. Well, how do you do that? You have to find someone like yourself. Also, you need to be high in nurture. You need to nurture your offspring. Well, how will you be more likely to do that? Well, if they're more like you, then you have more of a genetic interest in them. You're more likely to nurture them. And so therefore you sexually select for someone that's relatively similar to you. And it is people that are more strategic that would be likely to sexually select for people that are just totally different from them, but just happen to look good.
What's R strategic?
The opposite of K, the opposite of slow. So R is that you're adapted to an unstable yet easy ecology. If it's unstable yet easy, you don't need to be really adapted to that ecology because it's not predictable. You can't predict it. How can you adapt to it? So all you go for is just evidence of genetic health. And what is evidence of genetic health? Well, it's youth and it's beauty, and so and youth, fertility in the woman. So you go for that, and the women go for the male equivalent.
Sounds like me.
Muscular. What?
That sounds like me.
Well, yeah, I do. That doesn't surprise me at all. Some of the things that you told me in the interview we did in Barnes, highly intelligent R strategist.
I usually like girls who are genetically different to me as well.
Yeah, you would do it. Yeah. You're an R strategist.
So that's typical for an R strategist.
Like that girlfriend. Well, I don't know if it's typical, but I think it's more. It seems to be more how it works, more likely. But there's all kinds of variation. And also men make trade-offs. So you might want to have a nice English girl who's similar to you and who's pretty, but you are not sufficiently high value to get that. So instead you go for a pretty foreign girl.
Interesting.
So you've traded one for the other.
Compromise.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things can occur.
I hate being put in the position, when the race issue comes up, where you have to say things like, oh, well, all my girlfriends are non-white, or, oh, I have lots of friends who are not white. Something about that bothers me. I feel like I've been bullied in a way, and so I don't become friends. I've got a friend in Ola who's Indian background. I don't become friends with people because of their race. That would be weird.
and I think there's a degree to which some people on the left probably do.
Yes.
They probably think. I mean, so you can imagine that Jeremy Corbyn thinking to himself, "Yeah, it looks pretty good for me to be with Diana Abbott."
Right.
That when she was, well.
Say no more. You can't win.
Quite how I don't know, but but there was it's almost like a trophy.
Yeah.
And you probably do get that. I mean, I know of cases of, let's say, a girl has autism and she's badly behaved, and so the upper middle class people don't want their darlings to be friends with her because she's badly behaved and she swears and whatever. But then she's got the official diagnosis of autism, and suddenly you can say, my daughter, she has a friend, she's autistic. Wow, what a good girl.
Yes.
What a tolerant, kind, yes. My daughter is tolerant, yeah. And so suddenly it's a trophy.
Yes.
And suddenly they want that.
Yes. Yes,
so,
just so they can tell people
just so they can, it was a fascinating study. I didn't know about this study until recently. There was just a study that came out by someone called Zacher in Germany, and he showed that people that are environmental activists are higher in dark triad traits than controls. Obviously, we expect that. But there was one study that he cited, I hadn't heard of this study, which looked at the psychology of people that eat organic food.
Oh, right.
And it found that a big mediating factor, a big factor in why people eat organic food is basically trait narcissism. It's so they can boast about it to other people, and those people go, "Oh, what a great person! Yes, I am very ethical." That was what was shown in the study. It doesn't surprise me at all, because if I think of all the bloody woke people I know from university, they all eat bloody organic food.
I've seen a little bit of myself in that, though, I have to admit, because...
Yeah, you're drinking some fucking weird milk now.
Oat milk.
Oat milk or something stupid.
Not milk. That's not milk.
I'd like to emphasise, this is milk.
From a cow.
From a cow.
There's I think it was the British philosopher Bertrand Russell said there's two reasons to read a book. One is the enjoyment of reading the book, and the second one is to tell people about it.
Right.
So I'll read a book and be like, I just read Dostoevsky. I'm damn sure going to mention that on podcast. I've forced myself through Thus Spake Zarathustra page by Nietzsche. I'm going to tell people about that. It's innate, isn't it? But I think what you're talking about is where it goes beyond a normal level.
It goes beyond. Yeah, I mean, and you're doing it. It's costly signalling as well. Organic food is more expensive.
Yeah.
So on a not even particularly subtle level, you're saying I've got the money for organic food. Yeah. I assume oat milk is more expensive than milky milk.
It is.
And so it's costly signalling.
Yeah.
I was in Oxford some months ago, and I wanted to go to an Indian restaurant. And by Indian restaurant, I meant what we went to in Liverpool, right? A British,
a good old-fashioned
Bangladeshi things I've heard of. but no, I was with somebody who wanted to go to an Indian restaurant with good reviews.
Yeah.
And this was called Mowgli or something. Mowgli.
Yeah.
And it was disgusting. and it was nothing I'd heard of. And we almost ended up at that in Liverpool.
That's right.
And,
yes.
at the last minute, I realised, hang on, it's a chain.
It's
a chain of terrible stuck-up restaurants where you sit on swings and there's Christmas lights all over the place. And there's curry that doesn't taste of curry, and it's just
authentic Indian.
It's not, though. I've been to India, and although, admittedly, in Delhi or in Jaipur or in Agra or in Pushkar, I haven't heard of any of the dishes, because it's Bengal is the stuff that we've heard of.
Yeah, yeah.
What's the other place where the Sikhs live? That state. But anyway, Pakistan. Yeah. It's spicy as hell.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
I had what's the spinach one?
Aloo gobi.
Gobi's potato, isn't it?
Paneer.
No,
paneer's the cheese.
It doesn't matter. But there's
a
spinach-based curry. It's quite a mild curry in the UK.
Yeah.
And in Delhi, it's
ferocious.
Yeah.
But there's no they don't sauce stuff, do they? We love our sauces, but there's very little sauce there. They don't sauce stuff too much.
No, not so much. No, and I was in one place in central Delhi. I forget the name of the road, and they served the food to us on banana leaves.
Nice.
That was very pleasant.
I like the most white version of Indian, as you say, Pakistani, Bangladeshi food. Stuff with cream in it, nuts. If it's sweet and nutty and creamy, I'm into it.
Well, I'm very pleased. I do all the cooking in our house, and on a Monday I must have a curry once a week, or I feel like dysregulated. and as an Englishman, and so when I started off, when we moved to Finland in 2006, I did all the cooking, and I just cooked curry every day.
Wow.
And then my wife said that by doing this, you've put me off curry for life. So she now just refuses to eat curry, which is a terrible shame. Well, at least if I cook it. Yeah. So I used to do chicken korma, and then various other ones that I could do, chicken madras. Not with sauce. I mean, we make the sauce myself from finding it on the internet or whatever. And or cookbooks in those days. And then now I've been compelled to limit it to 1 day a week. But recently I found that my son and daughter quite like chicken tikka.
Ah, yes.
Which is spicier.
Just
get the basic thing.
It's in the genes. It's in the DNA.
They're half English.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're half. Well, none of the Duttons actually went to India.
Yeah.
No, they went to Nigeria. And the Caribbean. Collateral ancestor that was the governor of Barbados. But and an ancestor who I guess I'm indirectly named after him, who died in Old Calabar in southern Nigeria, aged 26 of typhoid. So he was an oil trader, but anyway, that happens in the genes, and so they like it. Chicken, so that's Monday.
There's whenever I've gone abroad, like in Malaysia and the UAE, there's a lot of Pakistani people there. There's a lot of Indians in Malaysia, and if I tell them that British people love Indian and Pakistani food, they don't believe me. I'm like, no, this is when there's a birthday, when there's a celebration. God, we've even done it at Christmas.
I would go so far as saying that there's a percentage of the English population.
Yes.
I don't know what percent it might be, 25% maybe.
Yes.
That eat Chinese food.
Right.
And that they don't eat Indian food.
Right.
That my childhood best friend, my family best friends,
Yeah.
my godmother and her, they were a family that ate Chinese food. And I was always, that made me suspicious.
Yes.
They were also Catholic. I don't know if there's a correlation.
There could be.
But
there's Catholics who eat Chinese, and then there's Catholics who eat Indian.
yeah, exactly.
Or you just say good or bad. Good or bad
Catholics. But they had Chinese food. That was the thing, not Indian food. Whereas we had Indian food and never Chinese food. And then presumably there's some families that mixed the two. I didn't. My father basically
They're called degenerates.
Yeah, my father hated Chinese food. So I didn't even really have Chinese food. I had Chinese food once on holiday in Dorset in about 1986 and didn't like it.
Yeah.
And then had it again when I went to university, and then suddenly there were all these middle class people that liked Chinese food. And then I tried it and I was like, that's all right, I suppose. There was this, what was this thing with a duck with purple sauce?
Oh, duck in oyster.
Peking duck, whatever.
Yeah, Peking duck.
Yeah, that was all right.
Yeah. Lovely.
But now it's Japanese food. My daughter's favourite food is sushi. And whenever it's her birthday or whatever, we want to go to a sushi restaurant.
Dip bits of.
I like that
fish
green
in.
stuff they have.
That's nice.
The wasabi, which is basically just horseradish.
It is.
But I quite like it.
You like it. You like it. I have two more questions for you. I do. How did you get into evolutionary psychology?
How did I get into evolutionary psychology? I did the old divinity degree, the divinity doctorate, and then I was doing lectures at the University of Wimbledon every so often, and so I had access to the library there before everything was on the internet. Of course, Go 6, and I just started going through. I think I was writing things for a magazine called Right Now, and I was aware of people like Richard Lynn and what they were saying. I was able to kind of suppress it, I suppose, or whatever. It was my interest to suppress it. And I thought, well, their books were there in the library. Richard Lynn, J. Philip Rushton, all this, and so I started reading them. E.O. Wilson, and I was like, wow. And I was writing this book about Finnish culture, and I looked at it from a completely environmentalist perspective, and I knew that there was something off about that. And then I realised, no, there's a genetic perspective to these things, and this makes sense of things. And then suddenly, suddenly it made sense of everything very quickly. Yeah, we've been denied during my education the genetic perspective completely.
Yeah.
You'd had these terrible, bad environmentalist determinist arguments, and everything suddenly made sense.
Yes.
And so then gradually, slowly, as I was carving out a nascent career. At the time, I was working as a journalist, and then occasionally as doing lectures at the university in the anthropology department. And then eventually, I was more understanding the importance of it. And then I got in touch with Richard Lynn, and this is about 2011. And then he gave me funding to start working for him and doing research on evolution. And so that's how it happened.
Is there any element of modern academic evolutionary psychology that frustrates you at the moment?
Well, yeah, there is a degree to anything that is powerful or that has prestige attracts the woke, because the woke like power and they like prestige. And so on the one hand, the woke will say intelligence research is evil, shut down the journal Intelligence, shut down evolutionary psychology. But on the other hand, they are attracted to it because intelligence research is highly replicating in a way that other research is not, and evolutionary psychology is actually properly scientific and works in a way that other areas like the soft sciences do not. And so you have this problem where they are increasingly attracted to it, and so there are things that we have trouble now publishing in journals like Intelligence, which we didn't 10 years ago, because slightly woker, cuckier people have been a younger generation really have been attracted into it. Yeah. So actually, it's more difficult to get into prestigious journals, evolutionary psychology, we could have got 10 years ago without any problem at all. And that's because it was a victim of its own success. Precisely because it's replicating and it's true, then it attracts in people that want to, in a weird way, are attracted to it for that reason, but also they need to virtue signal and suppress that very research which has got it prestigious in the first place. So that's frustrating. And I guess another thing that's a little bit frustrating, perhaps, is that if you in the humanities scholarship, you can just speculate till the cows come home.
Okay.
As long as you spend half your academic study defining your terms and all this crap. Whereas in these ones, you don't have to piss about saying, what do we mean by religion and all this. But they won't let speculation, no. Show me the data or shut up. And there should be room, I think, for intelligent speculation. So perhaps that's slightly frustrating.
I remember, I think in the last interview you said that a famous public intellectual, Thomas Sowell, made some comments about IQ that were just wrong.
Yeah.
What was his assertion?
No, he was just doubting heritability and race differences and things like this. And I mean, I'm afraid everyone has blind spots except me. And there's a scholar I know. He's very intelligent, but he has a complete blind spot when it comes to his specific ethnic group.
Yep.
Doesn't like the research on that. I know many of them like that actually. I know a Zambian scholar who's great, but then he has a blind spot with regard to that area, his own ethnic group or whatever. And so I'm afraid you just get people like that have these certain blind spots that they have difficulty with.
My final question is Europe salvageable?
Yes. Well, the problem that I have at the moment is that the AI it's happened very fast, and it's looking like it's going to be a new industrial revolution. In the same way that the internet was a kind of industrial revolution, and even social media was. But certainly the internet was. And what that does, what they seem to do, those revolutions, is they hollow out the middle. They push more middle people down into the bottom, get rid of their jobs, and an intelligent group within the middle go into the top.
Yeah.
And so with the farming, with the agricultural revolution, that's what it was. The death of the farm labourers, they carried on. Big farms, they carried on. Small-scale farmers knocked out.
Right.
And and it's a similar thing that's going on. And so it's difficult to know exactly what's going to happen because of AI. I'm hoping to discuss it with a colleague this afternoon, actually, in more depth. But I think that if putting aside AI, I think that what wokeification is doing is basically genetically selecting indirectly for genetically conservative right-wing people. And it's doing that among the more intelligent. We've got data on this. Among the more intelligent, the big predictor of fertility is that you're conservative, that you're religious, that you're traditionalist. And therefore you will see a movement back among the more intelligent. They tend to lead the culture among people towards people like that. Yeah. And those people will come together and they will hold out in certain parts of Europe in the same way that at the moment in South Africa, the white minority are basically creating a separate parallel society based around private security and things like that, and are holding out. Yeah. And so I think that now the question is where. Now I'm doing research at the moment that indicates that intelligence is declining across Europe, but it's declining less in Eastern Europe for various reasons. Even if you control for their poorer start in things like Pisa, it's declining less, probably because they industrialized later. It's even among the native population. Yeah. So I think that it may be that there would be a migration from west to east, and the light of European civilization will be more in the east. Yeah. So but it's hard to say. I'm looking into it at the moment. It's an ongoing project.
Fascinating. Professor, thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure to talk to you again.
Yeah, it's my favourite interview, actually. Ladies and gents, thank you very much for your time and for your attention. Oh, where can they find you?
So jollyheretic.com on Substack, where you can get stuff we don't put on YouTube and in-person interviews and right. I'm being told to look at the camera and things like this. And then a YouTube channel, Jolly Heretic, and then Twitter @Jolly Heretic, and then my books are all on Amazon. And then edwarddutton.com is where there's all my academic papers and my summaries of my books, so you can go there. So come and say hello.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.